And with that, I will turn things over to Katie.
Thanks, Becca. Hi, everyone. Welcome, and thank you again so much for attending today. For those of you who attended last week, we're certainly happy to have you back today. And if you're new today, welcome. And as Becca said, you also have the opportunity to go back and watch the presentation from last week. So again, today's session is about proactive procurement, how to ask for and get what you need. Next slide, please. So this is hosted by WVU TAB. We are the technical assistance to brownfield provider for EPA Region 3. So you see listed on this slide here, myself, I'm Katie C., the Brownfields Redevelopment Specialist and TAB lead here at WVU TAB. And Becca, she is our guru here for education and outreach and webinars. So if you have any questions during the webinar, she's a great one to speak with. If you have any questions following this session, please reach out to her and certainly any of us here. And Carrie is the fearless leader here at our organization. So this lets you know how you can get in touch with us. Next slide. So just a little bit about why are we here and what are we doing? Through TAB, one of the ways we provide resources is brownfield education and connection to resources to help you with your project. And procurement is a very important process, and we are assisted here today by Joelle with the Center for Creative Land Recycling. So on our behalf, she has put together a great presentation which follows up from last week's presentation. So I encourage you to sit back and take notes, but also know that the presentation is available. And also Joelle will be telling you about a takeaway she has prepared, which just kind of summarizes some tips and tricks from last week as well as this week's session. So again, thank you so much and welcome. And I'm going to hand it over to Joelle.
Thanks, Katie. Hi, everyone. Good morning, and thank you for joining us for day 2. As Katie mentioned, I am a consultant for the Center for Creative Land Recycling, and I've been a brownfield practitioner for many, many years. And one of the things that I have learned, and I answer a lot of questions, is about procurement, which is what we went over day 1. But more importantly, besides knowing the rules and regulations of procurement, is also working with your contractor. So that's part 2 today. So as I mentioned, I'm a senior planning consultant with the Center for Creative Land Recycling. We're a national nonprofit promoting the sustainable, equitable, and responsible reuse of underutilized properties. Just like Katie and West Virginia University, advocate, educate, convene folks. We have newsletters and blogs, but we are the TAB provider for 9 and 10. And as you can see, West Virginia University there is in 3. And there's TAB providers across the country. So if you're not specifically in our region or WVU's region, there is KSU, ICMA, and UConn and NJIT. So any questions, you can just go to the TAB, EPA TAB providers, Google that, and you'll land on this page as far as who they are in the context. All the services are free. These are some of the things that we all do, but any questions, just reach out to Katie and the gang and they'll get you to the right folks. All right. So what's our agenda? Well, first and foremost, we're going to do a brief recap of day 1, and then we're going to go into the selection process, because where we left off was the bid process, right? So now we're going to get into the selection process and then the best management practices of contracts. Then we're going to get into contractors and roles, smart expectations, personnel changes, deliverables and reporting, exit strategies, always good to have the exit strategy, invoicing, payment, and of course, ASAP. We're going to end on the art of managing contractors. And yes, this is an art. The more that you do it, the better you get at it. Internal controls as far as your own organization, and wrapping it all up with successful grant administration. So let's get into day 1 recap. As Katie mentioned, we went over the regulations of procurement. What is it? Why we do it? The guiding principles and the tenets. We went over the procurement clause, right? So all of these things we discussed in great detail. And then at the bottom here of this slide are those hyperlinks to the 2 documents that I believe I said not less than 6 times. The 2 EPA procurement guidelines. The first one on the left is your Bible, and I'm going to do it again, just like I did the first day. This thing, it's not very big, but it is very dense. It is 27 pages. And then the second guideline is the one that most recently came out in the spring of 2023 with respect to guidance on competitively procuring for a contractor. And when I say competitively, right, we remember the clause, right? There are 5 ways of methods of procurement, and the competitive proposals is that 4th one, the 4th digit, if you will. This is the takeaway. This is also up on the West Virginia website for this webinar, but the basics, the tenets, the UGG or the uniform guidance, grant guidance standards, the difference between RFP and RFQ, solicitation components, and the bid process. Again, these 2 links, you can't get enough of these 2 links with the procurement guidelines. But after day 2, this one will be married with the day 2 one. So it's a front back, and you'll have everything at your fingertips. Okay. So without further ado, we're going to get into the day 2. So evaluation and selection. So we've gone over the rules, the regs, getting out a solicitation, right? Whether it's an RFP or an RFQ. And then now you've got your proposals back, right? You've done everything right. You have wonderful proposals in front of you. Now what do you do? Well, the evaluation and selection process. So one of the biggest things is referring back to your internal procedures. And yes, you must have written internal policies and procedures when it comes to evaluation and selection. Why? Because you need to make sure that you can show, if you're ever audited, that it was done in a free and open competition, right? And that the way you evaluated your proposals was in a way that was not biased, right? And that it actually matches with the evaluation that you put in your solicitation, right? Whatever the solicitation is, the evaluation criteria, that is what you're going to be evaluating on. Okay. So you need to build your team, make sure they're unbiased and that they're knowledgeable. I personally like to have a cross section of disciplines. So I would have somebody maybe from economic development or from, if there's a brownfields, site and there's lots of infrastructure and there's going to be transportation issues. Maybe you get someone from public works, maybe from transportation planning. Maybe it's, someone who is very familiar with the project, a champion of some sort. But remember, they need to be unbiased, okay? So be careful of any conflicts of interest, that it's not like, oh, my brother is on, one of these, he's a contractor for one of these companies, right? And they're really good. And you're like, yep, they could be really good, but you could have a conflict, a direct or even a perceived conflict of interest, okay? So just be very careful of who's going to be on the evaluation team. Select a facilitator. Honestly, this was the best thing I've ever done, is to select someone who is not going to be voting. For me, when I was in local government, I would have someone from our procurement or even human resources come in and be the facilitator. They would be collecting all the scores, which is more of what the next thing is a blind evaluation. That is, you are going to be looking at these proposals, each one of your selection team. And I would suggest that the selection team hopefully be at least 5 people. Okay. Can it be 3? Sure, but that's getting a little, the pool is getting a little small. If you have 5, then you don't have a tie, right? But 5 seems to be the perfect kind of number, but we'll hear from Austin and Natalie here from Bellamar as far as their process too in a bit. But, you know, having a facilitator takes out that all you have to be is a participant, right? And you can concentrate on that. And so having a facilitator collects all those individual proposals. So you're going to have an evaluation, right? The evaluation that was in the solicitation, those criteria, and you're going to be scoring each proposal. And you're going to be doing it individually so that you're not talking with any of the other evaluators, right? This way it's a blind evaluation. Okay, so you give all that to your facilitator. The facilitator then takes all that information and then, you know, puts it up when you get together. We usually had a whiteboard. They would put up the scores, you know, individually, but they would not put up the firm names. Okay, so we didn't know who the firms were yet, and so the scores would go up, and at the end, the scores would be, you know, averaged, right? And we would look at them. So if there was definitely with interviews, right? Interviews can be really critical. For me, I always had interviews because I wanted to know who I was going to be working with, right? Who is the project manager? You don't necessarily want to know or have a dog and pony show, right? Like you really want to know who is that day-to-day person I'm going to be working with, that project manager, right? And, you know, what are the things, or have they really read what the solicitation was? Do they know your organization? Do they understand your mission? Do they understand your demographics? Do they understand, have they read your comprehensive plan? Are they prepared, right? Are they going to be, so this is a long grant, right? EPA grants are anywhere from 3 years to 5 years, right? Depending on what kind of grant you have. This is a long relationship, right? You want to make sure that it's a good partnership. And that's what it really should be, a partnership, okay? Not one that's just like, here you go. We're going to get into roles and responsibilities in a bit. And I believe Natalie will have some points on that too. Okay.
Hey,
so,
Joelle.
Yeah.
Quick question from the chat.
Yeah.
Savannah asked to clarify, are these best practices that you have learned through experience, or are they regulatory requirements in terms of non-voting facilitator, eval team of 5, et cetera, et cetera?
Great question, Savannah. Hi, I'm so glad you joined again, because you always have great questions. They are best management practices. They are not regulatory. We will get into the regulations, but the regulations are basically saying that you evaluate them to your criteria that was in the solicitation. Okay. So, but you want to make sure, one thing about the regulations is that they say that you have to document it. Okay. So making sure that you document how you actually did the selection process. Right. And that could be the copy, the solicitation, that could be the copies. Our facilitator would keep all the score sheets, right? So they would keep a repository of all those score sheets, take some, meeting minutes, just some like how it was done and everything. And then that would be kept so that if anybody ever asked about it or challenged it, and believe me, if a contractor is not selected, they can challenge it. Okay. So just be prepared, but no, they're not, having a non-voting facilitator or anything like that. That's not regulatory or anything. But when you read through, and we don't have time to go through the regs step by step, but when you go through them, you want to just make sure that it's defensible. That if somebody came in and said, why did you pick firm A instead of firm B? You can answer with objective data and be like, this is how the scores came, you know, individual evaluators, they didn't talk to one another. This was the process. Here's our process and procedures, right? We followed them. This is how we did it, right? So that's the biggest thing. Alrighty. So this is just a sample of an evaluation and selection, right? The written proposal criteria is on the left, the ratings for each person, like for each firm, right? For each contractor or proposal that came in. And then, you know, the criteria 1, criteria 2, so this is just an example of how you can, you know, score. If you have something else, you can do it on percentages, right? Here they had ratings of 0 to 5, but you could also do it on percentages. But remember, whatever it is in the solicitation, if you said 100%, 35% is on costs, right? Cost principal has to be at least 25, right? The evaluation team, the experience with contaminated properties, right? What are those scores? So just make sure you're following that. Okay. So, so we have firm A, firm B, firm C, right? The cover letter, the experience, the quals, the cost, the interview. This is just an example. Okay. So as you can see, firm C knocked it out of the park with the cover letter, right? And also with the experience. But the interview, not so good, right? Didn't quite really hit the mark. So firm A, with the score of 95, has a very significant lead over anybody else, right? So firm A would be your, you know, your contractor that would be the one that you would select, okay? So cost, it's even being evaluated here too. So that's one of the biggest things to remember. And we talked about that a lot last time, so we won't get into it this time. Natalie, did you want to say anything as far as evaluation or, you know, your and Austin, and please introduce yourself to the group and your role here with West Virginia, or, you know, anything that you'd like to tell the group.
Sure. I'm AC Weethy, and Natalie Hamilton with Bellamar Regional Council. And we're a small regional council here in West Virginia. We're Region 10. We have 3 counties in the northern panhandle of West Virginia. And we also have 1 county in Belmont, which is Belmont County, Ohio. So we're just going to share our, and maybe some tips on our process, our RFP that we did. So Bellamar was a coalition grantee. And so we were the grantee, but we also had 2 coalition partners, one in Belmont County, the Port Authority, and Wheeling Heritage was our partner in West Virginia. So that was kind of unique too, because we're in 2 different regions, but you were able to do that through Region 3. So we were awarded this process. And so in our RFP process, one of the things we first established is how we're going, after we had decided documented the process we're going to use for procurement, was setting up building our evaluation team. So we had an assessment grant before as well. So we kind of went through this process once, but we have a Brownfield task force, which Natalie leads that. So they're very active. So we already had members on there that had some experience, and they're the ones out in the community that are, you know, handling a lot of talking about some of the projects we have, some of the areas we have available, some things, some contaminated sites that they bring to us. So we determined, like you talked earlier, is a 5-person selection committee. And on that committee, we had our executive director, who has a wealth of experience. He's worked here for almost 40 years and had done a lot of federal grant management in the past. So he served on that committee. We had a representative from both of our coalition partners, which was important to have them involved, but they're also heavily involved in our task force, and they have backgrounds. One of them is an economic development, Port Authority, and then Wheeling Heritage has done a lot of work in the city of Wheeling and have procured a lot of contract services through federal grants as well. And then lastly, our other two members were a city manager from one of our larger municipalities, who has been, doing this kind of work for over 20 years of experience. And then an economic development and community development director for the city of Wheeling, our largest city. And they procure a lot of services such as this. So we felt like we had the experience there, the understanding of this process. But even going along with that, we still go through some training as far as that committee, understanding the procurement process we're going to go through, and understanding, like you talked about, is the things you can't and can't ask. So we also review we kind of come up with some questions and things like that we should be considering after we've put together that, as part of the RFP, that technical evaluation. So that's what we established. And then Natalie served as our facilitator. So she was the person that was non-voting. She did all of our scores. She took the evaluations. So she created, based on the proposal, the score sheets for each one of those members, and they all scored them individually. So after proposals were received, the first thing they did was score based on the proposal, just the qualifications, that technical evaluation. No, I shouldn't say the proposals, the qualification side of things, so that technical evaluation. So those were scored and provided to Natalie. And then the next step was we chose interviews as well. Again, we've been doing this for a number of years. We do a lot of stuff with other engineers as well, and making sure that in a lot of cases, we're not the grantee, but we're working for our municipalities or counties. And we want to make sure that in that interview, like you said, you get to meet the team members. That interview should be, the people that show up should be the project manager, who you're going to be working with. If there's any subcontractors as part of that as well, that they would be represented and identified, because that's an important part. Like you said, you're going to be working with them for 2-3 years, depending on how quickly you spend your money, but the grant's for 3 years. So you need to be comfortable with who you're working with and their experience. So the interview process takes place. They also blind score that as well. And then those are given to Natalie, and then those are tabulated. And so you basically have all your technical evaluation completed. It's shared with the committee. In our case, I don't think we did blind. We did blind scoring, but I think we had the firms on our sheet on where they fell after the scoring of all the technical and the interviews.
Yeah.
So that's a good idea, though. I like that idea, that not knowing who it is, but we learn things. That's why we're here today.
Yeah. Yeah. And just on that point, which I'm fascinated by this process right here. I love hearing all this. The other thing is, I say blind, but the other thing is, it's good to have, it's just looking at this example. Let's say firm B, whatever, like when you have the individual scores up, right? And you see that, I don't know, Jack gave a 5 on the interview and everybody else gave 20s. And you're like, what happened, Jack? What's going on here? It's like, well, I thought I heard X, Y, and Z. And everybody goes, no, he didn't say that. He said blah, 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 blah. Oh, well, then I would change my score to a 20 then. So it's also good to have discussion like that when there is there's a score that just doesn't make sense with everybody else's scores. You're like, can we talk about this? And that's what the facilitator's job is, right? They're like, there's really odd, like what happened with this? And somebody said, well, I just didn't think the team qualifications were, I have experience with this firm and this happened. And there was a level of detail that wasn't there. And this is my experience. And it's like, okay, all right. So it could go the other way too. So when I say blind evaluation, it's that initial part, but it's good to have discussion because there could be other information or misunderstandings, lost in translation, whatever it is, so that the scoring needs to be, unbiased, but also needs to make sure that everybody has the same understanding so that the scoring, you know, is basically fair and that everybody has the same understanding. So, but please continue. I love hearing this process.
Yeah, I would agree. So the other thing too is with the interviews, that's also important because there might be something that's missed in that just reading of the documents. Like you said, if someone has someone scored low, or maybe you all do, and maybe there's something in the interview that a question can be asked to see if it's something could be clarified. So there's that opportunity as well. And I think that's where the interview helps out. But
well, I was going to say that kind of happened what you described in our interview. And that was, you know, it had more to do with one of the subcontractors for the consultant. And one of our interview people, they had worked with that subconsultant before and maybe had some issues, and they had scored the whole firm very low. But we kind of said, you know, they'd probably only be working on one of our sites. So that kind of changed her opinion of her final score for that firm. So yeah, I think having an open discussion is good to do it with the team.
And back to the blind thing, I also think that's important too, because sometimes you don't always know, and especially if you're working with people that maybe don't have as much experience, is everybody has a voice. That's right. Your voice. That's your chance to evaluate without someone. If it's just all open discussion, there might be someone who's, you know, got a strong personality and leading the group. And this allows each person to know that they're important. Your evaluation is just as important as the next person. And that will all come out in some of the discussions after you review the scoring. So.
Yeah, I love how you brought up the, you know, in the notes here that I've said it's unbiased and knowledgeable. Your team was a rock star team. You had people that had from different disciplines. I loved how your coalition, they were represented even in the selection process, which is wonderful. You know, having a seat at the table, being a part of that, because when you look down the road 3 years from now, you can say, look, everybody was a part of this in choosing this contractor, right? So, and the fact that, you know, that you've got experience with procuring services, or even if they didn't have experience with procuring services, they had experience in economic development or knew the city well, or, you know, each person that was there had a role or a different lens that they were looking through that makes, you know, the process that much richer, you know, and more comprehensive. So I love, Natalie, that you brought up subs. And I want everybody to make note of this, okay? That any work that a contractor is not going to do, and that, you know, in your RFPs or RFQs or whatever, make sure you're asking about subs, because I've been there where the main contractor, right? The general says, oh yeah, no, we're going to sub that out. And it's like, what do you mean? We thought you were going to help us with those community outreach meetings, or we thought you were going to be heading up, you know, one of the most difficult parts of this cleanup or something, right? And it's like, oh no, we're subbing that out. It's like, okay, but we didn't see those people that you were subbing out to, or their qualifications or this or that. So just make sure that you're aware of subs, and, you know, making note of it. And if there are subs, that comes up in the interview process. Okay. Great stuff. If no one has questions, we're going to continue. We got lots to cover. Great discussion. So basically the best management practices of contracts. Here they all are. Okay. Pulling from, this is the general overview, right? So now you've selected a contractor, right? Okay. So now you have to go through your process, whether it's, you know, the resolution or council, or, you know, how you get them officially on board, right? Okay. But now you have a contract with the contractor. Now the contract is that legally binding document. That's what's between the two parties the scope of work, which is what we've already discussed in day one, right? That's going to be really important because a well-defined scope of work, as we've already discussed, is what is going to lead to your metrics, your goals, the why, the purpose behind the whole grant, why you're even contracting, and what the deliverables are and how they're going to be delivered to you. So making sure that your contract is very clear and detailed. If something is not clear, if there's a definition missing, that is an ambiguity, right? So, the parts of contracts, the legal and regulatory compliance, and of course, every contract should definitely go through a legal review, right? There's whether it's a municipality or an organization, there are certain things that need to go in. There was a city I was working with in Washington, and their own city contract regulations, all these things. There were several pages specific to that city. So make sure that those specific things are in those contracts, whether it's, lobbying or anti-lobbying, those sort of things, right? The things that I discussed about DBE and that language that has to be in the contract, right? Talk about performance metrics and invoicing. These get very detailed. And it's why? Because when there is a question or something goes afoul, what is the first thing you're going to do? You're going to go to your contract, right? Was that in the scope of work? When were they supposed to, invoice us? We haven't received an invoice in like 3 months. Like, what's going on here, right? How are they communicating with you, right? The communication channels, very important. Change management procedures, very important as far as if there's any changes or if there's a change control, which we will discuss later in this webinar. But when things change, like that project manager that you had, personnel changes that you just clicked with on the interview, well, they decided to take a new job and the project's in place. And now, wait a minute, now that's not your project manager anymore. So these are the things that in your contract, hopefully, lay out what the procedures are when these things happen. Okay. So, and of course, we'll get into the dispute resolution mechanisms and termination and exit strategies. It's the necessary evil, right? It gets to that point. Maybe it's even, of nobody's fault, but you need an exit strategy, right? And if you're going to have to terminate a contract, you definitely want to make sure you have that in your contract should you need it, right? Okay, so first part's done. We're going to get now into contractors and roles. So we've done the solicitation, we've done the evaluation process, we've hired the contractor, and now we're getting into the roles and expectations and personnel changes. Okay, so contractors and roles. What's the contractor's role? Well, they're the expertise. They're going to help you. They're going to guide you, right? You don't have the expertise in environmental site assessments, right? The reason why you hired this contractor was because you didn't have the expertise, right? You're missing this. And so these are all the things that they're going to help you with. And there could be more. These are just some of those things, right? Defined in the scope of work, right? This is what you're asking them. And they want this. They want to have clear instructions. What do you need from me so that I can fulfill your needs, right? So there's no ambiguity. Okay, that's their role. So what does that leave you? What is your role? Your role is you are the cooperative agreement recipient, or as in ACRES, the EPA database, right? For Brownfields information, right? You are the cooperative agreement recipient, or the CAR. The CAR is the legal responsible entity for the grant, right? So you have a cooperative agreement, right? Then you have a work plan, okay? And then you have terms and conditions, right? to the cooperative agreement. So 3 documents, but you are the one that signs this, right? You're the one that has the cooperative agreement, which means that if something goes afoul, right, is it the contractor's issue or your issue? It's going to be your issue because you are the cooperative agreement recipient. And if that's why it's so important to read the cooperative agreement that you have, okay? Because knowing all that, and I know you've heard me say it again and again, I can't say it enough. You must read your cooperative agreement and please review the terms and conditions, okay? I know they're long, but they are a necessary evil kind of thing to just be aware of. That's where all those cross-cutting federal authorities are, like the 2 CFR 200, right? Or the Endangered Species Act, or all the National Historic Preservation Act, right? You're like, Joelle, I don't have National Historic. What is all that? That's a cross-cutting authority, right? Terms and conditions. Okay, so you're in the driver's seat. You're the one that should be, right, moving this project, right? Making sure that the grant is meeting its deliverables and milestones, all the things that you said you were going to do, the outcomes, the outputs, you're the driver. If the contractor is taking your seatbelt off and you're switching seats, one, there better be a good reason, or 2, if it's low capacity, this is an opportunity for you to use that partnership to understand how you can drive, right? If they're like, yeah, we've got plenty of experience with ESAs and brownfield grants, and we can do your reporting for you and this and that. And you say, that's great. Huh, I have more time to do my other stuff. The problem is you're going to lose sight, and you're going to lose sight of how this grant is helping your community, or what it's going to be doing for the next steps, right? What's that next step besides this grant? Is it a cleanup grant? Is it maybe a revolving loan fund? Is it maybe leveraging an EDA grant? So the more that you are driving the grant, right? Driving the timing, setting the pace, because the next thing you know, you don't want all of a sudden, hey, we're going to be doing cleanup, right? And it's like, whoa, we have not vetted this with the community. We have, it's going too fast for us, right? So just make sure that you know that you ultimately are the driver, okay? And you have the goals, you have the vision, because at the end of the day, you still stay with the community, right? It's your community, but the contractor goes on to other things and other communities and other jobs. But do they want to do a good job? Of course they want to do a good job. They want to make sure that what you've asked for has been delivered. So be a good driver, be a good guide, okay? So last but not least, you're the champion and also connecting to the community. So with that said, smart expectations. Not going to spend a lot of time on this because I'm pretty sure everybody has heard of SMART goals or SMART objectives. Well, I also like to think of SMART expectations. If everybody's expectations of one another are checked right at the very beginning, how do you like to communicate, right? If you're managing expectations from the very beginning, you're going to have a good run, okay? You're going to have some good times, because when expectations are not SMART, right? They're not specific, they're not measurable, they're not attainable. Like, okay, I expect you that when I call you, that you respond to my email or my phone calls within 15 minutes. Is that attainable? Is that really realistic? No, that's not a SMART expectation, right? So you need to just have that kind of, from the very beginning, setting up the expectations between one another so that, you have a stronger partnership, you build respect and trust, right? All these things, when to expect things, what to expect, and you're being efficient with time and resources, okay? Personnel changes. Nobody likes personnel changes, right? But it happens. So whether or not it's the contractor or on your side, just be aware and be ready for personnel changes. That's all I can say about this, okay? Is that, you know, I'm not going to go through each one of these, right? Everybody can see this slide. They're already reading it, right? So these are all really, like, from my own experience, this is very tantamount to making sure it goes into succession planning, right? So making sure you keep your institutional knowledge, you know, if you're training somebody up, make sure you're cross-training. But, you know, with personnel changes with a contractor, now that's a different animal, right? How is that going to be as far as the transition? What is the timing? How do you retain the knowledge? What is the onboarding going to look like? Is it going to slow you down? It shouldn't. So you need to make sure that the contractor has a backup too, right? As far as, well, if the project manager were to leave and you have a new one, is that onboarding going to get charged to us? It shouldn't be. So just make sure that you have those kind of understandings, updating the agreements, anything that you need to do, right? I love this quote from Richard Branson, the Virgin Atlantic guy, right? Train people well enough so they can leave, but treat them well enough so they don't want to. It's one of my favorites. So Natalie and Austin, did you ever experience any personnel changes on the contractor side by any chance?
We have not. No.
That's good.
Yes.
Okay.
We've been lucky with that.
Yeah. Sometimes they're hiccups. They're not really that, you know, big bumps in the road. And on the other hand, sometimes they are really big bumps. And then the project lags, and then you got to explain that in the quarterly report. It's just something to be aware of. All right. We are at the deliverables and reporting exit strategy. So deliverables and reporting. So, you know, this should be already in your contract, right? And it should have been in your solicitation from the very beginning. But what the general deliverable is, right, is in that scope of work. But then when you get into the contract, right, exactly what the deliverables are, I'm sure everybody has had this happen to them. You hire somebody, let's say it's for a framework plan, right? Just a framework plan, right? And it's all done. It was a great project, and you get the final work product in Adobe Suite or some program, or InDesign. How about that? InDesign. I don't know about you, but I don't think everybody has InDesign on their computer, right? And so you're like, well, how am I going to open this? How am I going to edit it, right? I just basically have a static document. And so you want to make sure that the deliverable that you have isn't static, right? That you say in your contract that you will be providing the following deliverables in Word, Google Docs, Adobe, whatever it is. Something that you can actually manage and manipulate, edit, whatever it is, okay? Usable format, that's what I meant by that. So as far as reporting, you know, what's the frequency of them check-ins, right? Check-in meetings, you know, the reporting. One of the big tips that I have is, you know, I ask contractors to give me monthly reports, one-pagers, right? So if you have a monthly report from January, February, March, when you do your quarterly reporting, right, in April, right, April 30th, when you do that reporting, now you have really 3 succinct reports that you can pull from to do your quarterly report very easily. And not only that, you can say, see more detailed in QEP's monthly reports, right? And then you email those off to your project manager at EPA. It's a really great way of having things right at your fingertips and making your life easier to do reporting, all right? And it shouldn't take them a very long time. It's a one-pager. It's a summary, not only of what happened this month, but what is expected to happen next month. Okay. So, and then that, say March 1 should say what we expect in the next quarter. This is really important when it comes to showing progress to EPA. One of the things with your grants is that you must show progress. If you have an $800,000 multi-purpose grant and it's a 5-year grant, and you're in year 3 and you've spent $600,000, right? Or let's just say $700,000. EPA is going to get a little worried. Okay. They're going to be like, what's going on here? You're 3 years, you still haven't spent down a good deal. That's showing progress, and you can get a letter. And if you don't show progress, EPA can rescind the grant. Okay. They can take back the money. So talk to your project managers if you are worried about showing progress, or there are things, or you just say, hey, look, I know we haven't spent down that much money, but here's the deal. We needed the lake levels to go down to do the sampling. And so now we've done that. And then we're working on design. And once that's done, we're ready to go with cleanup. And we're going to have a huge amount of probably, another 35% of the grant is going to be spent down in the next quarter. That's gold right there. Okay. So just make sure that you're also forecasting how your reporting is too, and work with your contractor on that. Okay. Ask them, they'll be happy to do this. Honestly, it makes their life easier too, knowing what you need to make really great progress on your grant. Okay. Because it looks good for them too. Details. But, meeting your metrics, we've all kind of just covered that and everything, but make sure you keep your metrics in the back of your mind, like your work plan. I'm not a huge, print out paper, but when there are important things like this guideline, I do. I print it out and I put it, on my desk here. If I was working on an EPA grant right now that I was managing, I would keep the work plan printed out and on my desk. I would have the contract at my fingertips. Okay. Okay. Exit strategies. We won't talk about this too long. Okay. But should you need an exit strategy, and you should plan for this. Okay. Look, it's one of those things like an auto policy, right? You have to have it, but you don't wake up and say, you know what, today I'm going to use my auto policy, right? Nobody wants to use a termination clause, right? But it's a necessary evil. Okay. So why have one? All these reasons, right? Ensures continuity of services. Should you have to terminate, what is going to be in place so that the continuity of services isn't interrupted. Okay. Data security, very important, right? Who knows what is being, transferred, or you want to make sure that what you have is secure, the data, the privacy issues, right? All these things, the ownership of work. Well, if you've done so much and we've paid for it, then all that work we are, we're, what's the word? Not requested. We are, we're privy to, right? We've paid it, and then you need to provide it to us. The smooth transition, of course, that goes into continuity, that you're on the same page. And of course, the transfer of data and knowledge. Okay. So that's the why. So let's get into some examples. And this is not legal advice. I probably should say that 3 times. This is not legal advice. Okay. These are just samples. This is a sample of a termination clause. Termination for cause. Sorry. This is the clause, right? I'm not going to read these. All right. But basically the termination for cause, and then you have the breaching party shall have X days, right, to cure that breach, so that you're giving them a chance to rectify things, right? Okay. So may terminate the agreement, right? Okay. Termination for convenience is this type of sample language. So there's 2 types of, and I'm sure there's other types of termination clauses, but these are just 2 types, right? Either party may terminate. Now, Would you want this? I don't know. This is a discussion between you, your coalition, your partners, your legal team, right? But whatever it is in your contract, just make sure that you have some type of exit strategy. Okay, invoicing. I love reviewing invoices. I don't miss it, but I really enjoyed it because it told me the story of, you know how a budget tells you the story? Well, invoicing tells me even more details of that story, okay? So it should tell you. It shouldn't be just meetings or telephone calls or site visit, 8 hours. You're like, what? Okay, because if you get audited, I can assure you that those kind of entries probably are not going to meet the muster. Okay, so ensure work is reasonable, right? I don't know how one can ensure that the work is reasonable when you don't know what the invoice is for. If it just says, you know, site visit 8 hours, do you know if the work was reasonable? Have no idea. The personnel matches the contract. Who did the site visit? Is it someone that's in the contract that we know, or is it some newbie that just came on to the firm? You have no idea. So you need to make sure that invoicing, that there's enough in there of the who, what, when, where, right? To tell you and to answer these questions, right? It will make it defensible, easy to approve. All right, T. Smith went out, you know, did a site visit to collect, you know, 60 samples or the samples necessary for groundwater, soil, blah, 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 yada, yada, right? Okay. The numbers add up. I can't say this enough. Did I have a calculator going 0.5 times 170, you know, blah, blah, blah. If the numbers don't add up and you can't figure out how they're getting their numbers, then somebody who's auditing you is not going to be able to figure it out either. Okay. So we've already talked about so what I mean here by clearly show authorization. So you have your invoice, right? I'm just going to use my paper here. And you have your invoice and you've reviewed it and you're going to circle the bottom number and you're going to put your initials, right? And the date. You've reviewed it. It shows when it came in. And, you know, that's the other thing. If you get an email with this invoice and it's a week after the date on the invoice, then say received, REC''D, received to that day's date, right? So you can show that there's been 7 days lapse and then you're approving it, what date that is. This is going to show that you did not, you know, have a lag time, right, in reviewing and approving. You know, you're doing what you're doing, you know, in a timely manner, but that there were post office issues or something, right? I don't know. So that's one of the things. But if there's an issue, let's just say part of the bill was by one firm and the sub bill for drilling, let's say, is not attached. And you're like, wait a minute. It says here drilling and it's a $15,000 bill, but I don't have the subs invoice, right? It could have just, you know, not been attached, right? Who knows? Honest mistake, but ding-a-ling. Received your invoice, but I don't have the backup for the drilling. Oh, really? Oh, sorry. We'll get that to you. Okay. So you can either authorize the part that you do have backup, or you can wait, whatever your procedures are. And then once you do get the backup, you can just make a note, right? No backup for drilling, awaiting for that, right? And you date it. Then when it comes together, you can say, great, authorize this date, and now it goes through. Auditor's going to see what the issues were and how you properly rectified it. You're good to go. Okay. So just make sure that you're, you know, just showing your work and how you're checking everything off. And if there's issues, you've noted it. Okay. That was invoicing. Okay. So hopefully there's been a progression here. And now we've gotten to payment. The invoice looks good. It's time to pay it. Okay. So how many, and I can't see this, so I'm going to rely on you guys, but is everybody enrolled in ASAP? Okay. The Automated Standard Application for Payments. It's the US Treasury. Okay. So years ago, this used to take a long time to get your money. Now it's instant. Okay. It's really, really fast. It's like an ACH payment. All right. So it comes out of North Carolina. For those of you who have had grants for a while, it used to come out of Las Vegas. Now it comes out of Research Triangle Park. All right. And no, if you're in North Carolina, do you get your payments faster? No. Anywhere in the country that you are, it's the same time frame. You're going to get it ACH payment. Okay. So there's an EPA policy, which is hyperlinked here. I highly recommend that you look at this because it's a policy that is overarching all about ASAP and payments. Okay. The do's and the don'ts. And here are the terms and conditions also. So the first form here is the initial enrollment. It's a one-pager, really simple, okay? If you have any questions about this, you can talk to ASAP. They're really helpful. And if you go to the link down at the bottom here, there's a number, there's an email. They're very helpful, okay? The third person you can go to, okay, well, phone call person, the other person you go to is your financial specialist, right? When you got that initial email that said, congratulations, right? You're the proud parent of a grant, an EPA grant. Well, that same email will tell you who your project manager is, who your grant specialist is, who your financial specialist is, and who your DBE coordinator. 4 names. Sometimes the DBE coordinator is sometimes also your grant specialist. Just depends, okay? But there is a financial specialist. They are a wealth of knowledge. And if you have any issues around payments or, you know, the numbers, that sort of thing with this stuff, financial specialist, okay? So again, very helpful. So you have your first form, you have to initially enroll. Your second form is your electronic payment designation. Where are they sending the money? That's essentially it, okay? So if you go to the ASAP page, these forms are there. Make sure you have clear division of approvals, right? Austin's going to approve it. Natalie is going to then take it and get it through the financial system, right? Austin's not going to approve and submit the invoice, right? That probably is not a good idea, all right? So make sure you have clear division of how you handle, and you should have written policies and procedures about payments, okay, just in general. Timing with reporting. Now, this is, I'm going to tell you already, we talked about this in day one. I don't think I've ever been able to match up, right? You have an invoice and you have to do a drawdown, which is what ASAP is from your grant. Let's say it's $100,000. I don't have $100,000. We don't have general obligation funds that can, you know, float $100,000. Okay, so what do? You take it and you go, okay, it looks good. Yep, I'm going to approve it and I'm going to send it to receive, you know, to get reimbursed. Okay, so you put it through ASAP and ASAP gives you the money. All right, and now you pay the contractor. Okay, so that's, in a perfect world, that's what happens, right? Okay, but you did this on April 1st, but your quarterly reports are talking about activities of January through March. Did you make the drawdown in that quarter? No. You incurred the costs, but you didn't draw down in that quarter. What do? Okay. You can do one of two things, right? You can talk about it in the quarterly report that basically says, we've incurred the following costs, right, in this quarter. However, we will be drawing down on the grant in the next quarter, because technically it is. April 1st is the next quarter, okay? So you can do it that way. And then after a while, you know, it catches up and some people say, you know what? Nope, we're just going to pay it in the quarter. We're going to make sure it's in the quarter. And then this way we can show the drawdown in our budget and it's all in that one quarter. Is there a right or wrong way to do it? Nope. Is it going to exactly line up? Nope. So don't worry about it. Just making sure that you tell EPA in one of your quarterly reports, like when, you know, where it makes sense, right? That we have incurred and that we will be, or we have drawn down. Okay. So when you say, when you put into your quarterly reports, if you haven't drawn down the money, do not show that you've drawn it down. So if you had a grant of say 200,000 and you have $100,000 bill or right invoice, and you put $100,000 and now you're showing, oh, your grant, you only have 100,000. That's technically not correct because you haven't done the drawdown yet. Okay. So unless you've actually drawn the money down, that's when you should show it in your budget. Hopefully that's not clear as mud. Okay. All right. So here's the big point. And I saved this for last because I really want everybody to focus on this. Okay. The recipient applicant information notices, or RAIN. If you've never heard of RAIN, please get familiar with them. RAIN announcements are fabulous. And if you haven't, you should be getting them. But these announcements give you basically the latest policy changes or things that absolutely you should know about. This RAIN announcement came out in 2018. And it basically said you cannot retain more than 5% of the requested amount or $1,000, whichever is less. Okay. So the biggest thing is that you need to remember when I had that example about the 100,000 and you have this, you know, this bill of 100,000, right? And you request it, right? You get that payment right away. Okay. Your finance person has gone for the day, you've left it on their, you know, their desk or whatever. Okay, the next morning, they get in at 7 o'clock. You don't get in till like 11. You were at a meeting, whatever, and they've already processed it. Money's there. Okay, money just came through. Okay, so now, you need to make sure that you get that contractor paid within 5 days. You need to have that money out of that account in 5 business days. Okay. So make sure whoever is sending out the checks or sending payments isn't on vacation. Because if you have it for more than 5 business days, that is a huge problem. And if that has happened or is happening or whatever, call ASAP. Okay. Pun intended. Okay. This is a huge issue. All right. Unless you get prior authority to keep this. Now, this does not apply to states. Okay. That is the one caveat. But if you haven't gotten the authority beforehand, and there's very, very limited occasions when this happens. Okay. But you need to have that authority prior to, if you're going to retain it more than 5 days. Okay.
Hey, Joelle.
Yeah.
We got another question in the chat. Savannah
Sure.
asks, so our quarterly reports are basically on a cash basis instead of accrual basis.
Meaning we're reporting when we actually are spending, like the money's leaving our account, not when we get invoiced.
Yes. Yes. Because here's what the bigger, the why, right? I'm all about the why, right, guys? Okay. The why. So back in Washington, right? Somebody's keeping track of the kitty, the Brownfields kitty. All right. And this kitty has a lot of money in it. And when you're drawing down funds, that kitty is getting smaller, right? When you're not drawing down your funds, the kitty stays the same, right? They're always checking that kitty. Why? For appropriations. They want to make sure this kitty is going down. And if you say, oh, we've drawn down $200,000, you put that in your budget and shows that you've drawn it down and now you only have left, you know, 200,000 or something. I'm making up these numbers, right? You've actually kind of it gives a false sense to that kitty. The kitty didn't go down $200,000, right? The bigger one. It still has your $200,000, because until you go and seek a reimbursement, right, draw down from ASAP, the money is still in the kitty. So whether or not you've incurred it, so if you're sitting on a bunch of invoices, let's say you guys have all the general obligation funds in the world, right? And you're just paying these invoices as they come in. And you're like, we'll get to them. You know, we'll do them all in one lump sum. We'll just do one ASAP request. Okay. You're sitting on $500,000 worth of invoices. And if you think that's crazy, I've actually run into this, and it was even a bigger number. Okay. They never did a drawdown. And they had quite a big cleanup grant. I was like, wow, you've spent a lot of money and you've never done a drawdown? The kitty back in Washington is still the same. Their $500,000 has not been taken out. So as far as Washington's concerned, that money hasn't been spent. Okay. So until it is drawn down, Washington still thinks it's at that, right? When this money goes down, it helps them to then go for appropriations and say, EPA Brownfields program is a hit. The money is being spent. We need more funding. Okay. So we all have to do our part to spend down this money, to draw it down, so that the appropriations, when it comes up, they say, yep, this is bipartisan and we need more funding because it is actually being spent out there. It's working, right? This is a program that works. That's the why. Okay. So hopefully that asks Savannah, great question. Okay. ASAP exercise. Ready? Let's do it. You have $1 million cleanup grant. You receive a $100,000 invoice. Sound familiar? All looks reasonable in line with the monthly reports you have been receiving. Your small municipality cannot cover these funds, so you submit a reimbursement request for the processing to your finance administrator for $100,000 through ASAP, with the intention of remitting the funds to the contractor within the 5-day time frame. Great. The following day, the finance administrator advises you that the $100,000 has been received. She's got it. He's got it. They've got it. It's done. They're about to process payment when you receive a call from the contractor advising you that one of the subcontractors made an error and the invoice is really $91,000. Do you have an ASAP issue? Be comfortable in the silence. It's all good. Just think about this. Okay. How many of you said yes? You would be right. But why?
5%.
Exactly. While it's less than the 5%, it's not less than the $1,000. Okay. So just make sure about that. Yes, it's less than 5%, but it's not less than the $1,000. That's that statement of whichever is less, right? So you can't hold on to it. So what do? Contact ASAP. There are various options, okay? So they may have you send back the money, the overage. There were some other things, but I'm not going to pretend I know what ASAP does, or I mean, I know what they do, but that's their decision of how they're going to manage it. Okay. So you have to call ASAP when you have a situation like this. Okay. Great job. All right. Last part. This is the art. So these are the things that go into the art of managing a contractor. And I really do think it's an art. And when you do it well, it really works out really nicely. When it's not done well, you never want to do another project again, right? You don't want to go through procurement. You don't want to work with a contractor. You're like, oh my gosh. But when you have these wonderful partnerships, right? Not only do you cross-pollinate one another with knowledge about your community, their knowledge about their expertise, right? What they're doing. Now you're getting some of their knowledge, right? Now you know what a phase one sort of costs, right? Or what phase two is all about. Or, you know, what is that? All appropriate inquiries and what's all involved with that? Oh, I see what this whole ASTM thing is about, right? You start gaining knowledge and you become, you know, a more sophisticated practitioner, right? That makes the next project and those that follow you, you can pass down your knowledge, okay? So making sure, you know, for me, whittling this down is those SMART expectations, the detailed contract, the specific asks. The more detailed you are, the more specific with your asks are, the better the contractor can help you with what you're trying to do, okay? Invoices, really critical, okay? And of course, my favorite, the communication channels. So let's talk about that. So with asks, okay? You could say, hey, you know, Joelle had that great idea. Monthly reports are due the following month, please. And they're like, okay, we can do that, right? Okay, better. Written monthly summary of reports in Word are due by the end of business day on the 15th of the following month and should not exceed 1 page or be billed more than 2 hours. There you go. That's very, very specific, okay? Be responsive to requests. And we've all heard that one in a contract, right? Be responsive to requests, right? How about respond to emails and phone calls within 24 hours? Now, does that sound unreasonable? Nope, not in my book, because I love that. I always put that in my contracts because I don't care if it's even just, hey, I'm super busy. Can I call you Friday? Or I'm traveling, or, you know, if I see an out of office, you know, vacation responder or whatever, but please contact so-and-so. Okay, great. Clear communication. If you're out of the office, make sure that you have a backup that I can talk to, because there might be a problem on the site that I need, you know, your response or your action, and I need to know who to talk to, right? Okay. The other thing for me is I'll get the report to you next week. Okay, next week, Wednesday, Friday, morning, afternoon, just be as specific as possible, right? Invoicing, we sort of already talked about this, right? So here's just an example that I wrote out, you know, telephone call with H. Jones regarding site visit at Barnum the week of 9/10, as well as logistics for in-person meeting with EPA, right? Another one, ABC Corp installs 8 monitoring wells at Barnum for groundwater sampling to determine presence of contamination. Not a lot of more effort, right? But those additional words provides a clearer idea of what is actually being done, okay? So just examples. Change control. Okay, change control. Change control is something that happens, for example, your contractor now merges with a bigger contractor, okay? No fault of their own or your own, right? You didn't know about this, right? There's a merger. Now all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, what just happened here? There's a change control. So these are the things that just, it's something that's in a contract that says if this happens, the following, you know, the assignees, the representatives, yada, yada, yada. Just be aware of like when change controls, if they happen, what's going to happen, you know, what are the steps that are going to be affecting you or what you need to do in this situation, okay? We talked about confidentiality and ownership, the termination clause, of course, and of course, dispute resolution. What is the venue? You know, dispute resolution or binding arbitration in the state of West Virginia or in the state of New Jersey or whatever that is. Make sure your venue is in there. Again, I'm not an attorney. I'm not giving legal advice, just my tips from my own experience. Okay, internal controls. This means your organization, all right? I think I've said this over and over and over and over. Document. This is 2 CFR 200-318I about the whole process. Very It'll lay it all out. I'm not going to recite from 2 CFR, but as we all know, 2 CFR 200 is the super circular. It is the mother lode of everything that you need to know about procurement. Okay, it's a cross-cutting federal authority. So develop detailed paper or electronic files, right, for each procurement action above the micro purchase threshold. So micro purchase threshold, $10,000. Then you also have 4 other procurement methods, right? There are the guidelines, page 7 on those guidelines. That's these guidelines. Man, I didn't think I'd hold it up twice, but I did. All right. Have a solid team. That's, you know, Austin, Natalie, you're a solid team here. It sounds like you've got a solid team with your Brownfields task force. That's also part of your team. Have a solid team. If you don't have a solid team, this is why when I'm working with folks right now who are getting grants, right, hopefully starting October 1st, I say to them, stop worrying about hiring a QEP. Stop it. Put it aside. You got plenty of time. You've got a 5-year grant. You got a 4-year grant. What you need is a solid team, a solid internal working team. If you don't have that set up, things are going to get away from you. You're not going to be able to keep up with things. If you have a solid team, you're ready to go, you're ready to hit the field running. And then when you get your QEP will be like, this is a great team. Like, I know exactly who's on it, who I need to talk to, who's my point of contact, right? So it helps them too. Know your roles and responsibilities. We talked about that. Who on the team? Well, you're on the Brownfield Task Force. You're on our procurement team. You're on our, selection process, whatever that is, community outreach, roles and responsibilities. Training, I can't stress this enough, training and cross-training. I've worked at municipalities. I've worked in the private sector. Whenever I am moving on, whoever knows, I don't know when that is, but from the very get-go, I start producing policies, procedures, things that I'm collecting, the institutional knowledge, right? So that the person after me has breadcrumbs. Breadcrumbs are vital. So make sure that you're cross-training so that, hey, if I win the lottery, I'm going to Bora Bora, okay? I may give 2-week notice, all right? But if that happens, yikes. This way, if you cross-train, you won't have the fire drill. You'll be okay. So successful grant management, know your cooperative agreement terms and conditions, know the deadlines and make them, okay? For those of you doing acres, okay, and I hope everybody's reporting in acres. It's very, it's much more streamlined. It's much more easy to do your reporting, but make your deadlines. If you're doing acres, all you got to do is put in a narrative. It doesn't have to be perfect. Let's just say you completely forgot about it, but today is the day. If you just do the minimum and you hit submit, okay, is that correct? No, it's not correct if you're doing the minimum. However, if it's almost midnight, hit that submit button, okay? It's going to go to your project manager, but it will have made the deadline. You can always modify it, right? They're going to send it back and go, Joelle, what were you doing? What were you thinking, right? You forgot the budget stuff. You forgot the ESA stuff. What's going on? Oh yeah, I forgot. Sorry, I must have hit it sooner, faster than I thought or something, right? But at least it's in acres and now you can modify it, all right? Just come clean. Just be like, man, I was working on something else and I completely forgot about it. And that's why you have a reminder on your calendar, right? But it's in and now you can modify it. If you miss the deadline, you cannot put it into acres. You have to use paper, right? And that goes to your project manager. You can never go backwards in acres, okay? You can only go forwards. Establish and foster those wonderful relationships. Clear communication, detailed contracts, work smarter, not harder, like those monthly reports from your QEP, qualified environmental professional. Ask for help when you need it. Nobody knows the answers. I don't know all the answers. Ask for help. I'm constantly learning, which is why I love this stuff so much and why I've been doing it so long. keep the end in mind always, because the grant that you have now, you want to be working on it as if you were getting the next grant, right? Because you're going to be so successful, you're going to be going for another one, and you're going to be getting to those redevelopment vertical projects, right? So what's next? Easy. Success. You do all these things, that's what's in your horizon. So we went a little long. Katie, I'm sorry. I'm going to hand it over to you for questions and give you the driver's seat.
Hey, it was very thorough. Thanks so much, Joelle. And thanks again for our Belmar friends. We really appreciate it. So yes, at this time, we'd like to see if anyone has any questions. And I know Becca also has just one quick question to run in our poll. This is a follow-up to the question, one of the questions that was answered during registration. So please take a moment to answer this. And again, if you have any questions, please reach out right now. If you think of them later, you have our contact information, and you're certainly welcome to contact us in that way. Now, we do want to thank you all for your questions during the session. It's great to have those along the way while you're thinking of them. It's always good to have them at that particular time during the webinar. So thanks again to everyone for participating. All right, if we don't have any other questions, could we go to the next slide? Thank you. Just want to give you a quick overview about how WVU TAB can help. So all of our assistance is free. There's no charge. Again, we are the TAB provider for EPA Region 3. So that's why we are here connecting with you. The resources that we are able to assist with include brownfield education. That includes webinars such as today, resource identification in terms of understanding EPA brownfield grants. We can help you with grant review, not writing, but review, which is a big help. Some documents such as resource roadmaps, so many resources we could help you with. Local brownfield program support, including conducting a brownfield inventory, which can help you from the very beginning to know exactly which sites you're dealing with and how many, and that can help you further down the process if you look to apply for a grant. Also, project development and design assistance that can be done in coordination with the Davis College here at WVU. And just another reminder that, again, with the resources we provide, we have the cooperation from great folks such as Joelle. So thanks again, Joelle. All right, next slide. So just a brief overview of upcoming events that we have. Unfortunately, registration is closed for in-person attendance at the West Virginia Brownfield Conference. There are some spaces available to attend virtually, so that's a pretty good setup. We would certainly encourage you to attend. You're going to learn a lot of great information. That's going to be September 12th through the 14th. It is in Wheeling, but again, right now, virtually are the only options available. And also just look for additional information for state-specific EPA grant webinars for the fiscal year 24 grant cycle. So if you check out the link there, you're already going to see registration available for Delaware and Virginia, I believe is what we have. We're still working through some other states. So we encourage you to attend that. That will be done in coordination with your EPA representative, your state environmental representative, and us here at TAB.
Katie, I would just add one thing about the West Virginia Brownfields Conference is that it does have a regional flair. We do have folks joining us from all over the region, and some sessions that will be relevant that you can see virtually. But also on Tuesday, the 12th, we have a grant writing workshop and a grantee meeting, and we do still have spots available in those. And EPA will be there in full force from Region 3. So if you're interested in attending just those, we do have spots available and they are completely free.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Carrie. And finally, here is our contact slide. I indicated last week that we would remove the Twitter bird. We did not. I think we're kind of rebelling because he looks so much better. Anyway, these are some ways you can get in touch with us. That would be email, signing up for our newsletter if you've not already done so, our website. And then also you can always schedule a one-on-one consultation for us. With us. Again, all of this is free. So scheduling a consultation is just kind of a quick access to calendar so that you can see the availability for Carrie and myself. And we always look to bring in those who may know a little bit more information on a certain topic if that's necessary. So again, we want to thank you so much. If you have any other questions, let us know. And we really do appreciate you attending again today. Thanks, Joelle. Thanks, Natalie.